The air in the office is thin and cold, recycled through humming vents that do nothing to clear the tension. It smells of stale coffee and expensive, soulless perfume. Her perfume, Clara. She sits at a desk that should have been a collaboration, a shared space for a growing dream, but is now just a monument to a lie. Her desk is made of polished white oak, a stark contrast to the dark walnut mark I chose for everything else when we started this company. It's a foreign object in the heart of our world. Her fingers, tipped in a pale, innocent pink, hover over her keyboard. She's pretending to work. Mark is standing by the window, his back to us both, trying to project an authority he no longer possesses. He thinks this is his room, his company, his victory. He is wrong. My footsteps make no sound on the thick, charcoal gray carpet. I bought this carpet. I remember debating the shade for a week, wanting something that felt solid, grounded. Something that would absorb the stress of late nights and impossible deadlines. It seems it's been absorbing secrets instead. I stop in front of her desk. She doesn't look up immediately, a deliberate act of dismissal. She continues typing, the soft clicks filling the silence between the hum of the vents. Mark finally turns, his face a mask of irritation. He opens his mouth to say something, probably to have security escort his estranged, grieving wife out of the building. But I don't give him the chance. I place the manila envelope on her pristine, white desk. It lands with a soft, definitive thud. That's what finally makes her look up. Her eyes, a shade of blue I once would have called pretty, are wide and questioning. They flick from the envelope to my face, searching for a hint of the broken woman she's been hearing about. She won't find her. That woman burned 2 ash weeks ago. The person standing here now is someone new, forged in the fires of a special kind of hell. Clara's perfectly shaped eyebrows furrow. She looks at Mark, a silent question passing between them. He gives a slight, dismissive shake of his head, as if to say, "Ignore her. She's irrelevant. He's always been good at underestimating me. It was endearing once. Now, it's his greatest weakness." "This is for you," I say. My voice is steady, colder than I thought it would be. It doesn't sound like my own. She slowly reaches for the envelope, her pink nails a small splash of color in this monochrome nightmare. She pulls out the folded sheaf of papers. Her eyes scan the first page. I watch her face, every micro-expression. I watch the confusion morph into disbelief. I watch her breath catch in her throat. Her gaze snags on one specific line, one specific name. Her name, right there in black and white, under the heading Subpoena Dutses Tecum. A legal command to appear, to testify, to produce documents. The blood drains from her face, leaving her skin the color of her desk. Her eyes dart up to meet mine, and in them, I see the first flicker of genuine fear. The kind of fear that has been my constant companion for months. It's a bitter, satisfying taste. Mark starts to move towards us, his illusion of control shattering. "What is this?" he demands, his voice tight. But I don't look at him. My focus is entirely on her, on the woman who thought she was winning. I watch her carefully constructed world begin to tremble. The room is silent, but in my head, it is deafeningly loud. This is not the end. It's the beginning of his. And she is the first domino to fall. If you've ever had to find a strength you didn't know you had just to survive the day, tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you feel the story in your bones, please subscribe. It helps me share these moments more than you know. Just 6 months ago, the world was painted in pastels. Soft yellows, gentle blues, the pale green of new leaves. We were painting the nursery. I remember the scent of low VOC paint and the sound of Mark's laughter as I got a streak of duckling yellow on my nose. He'd wiped it away with his thumb, his touch so tender it made my heart ache with a fullness I thought would last forever. His hand would rest on my belly, a gentle, possessive weight, as if he could protect the tiny life inside through sheer will alone. "He's going to have your eyes," he'd whisper into my hair at night, his voice thick with sleep and dreams. And my terrible sense of direction, I'd laugh, a quiet, happy sound in the dark. We were a team. We were building a life, a family, a future, all at once. Our company, Innovate, was our first baby. We started it in our garage with 2 laptops and a shared dream of creating beautiful, functional software that made people's lives easier. We poured everything into it. Our savings, our sleep, our 20s. I handled the design and user experience. He was the coder, the architect of the back-end magic. We were a perfect partnership. Our skills complemented each other. Our vision was aligned. We argued, of course. We had marathon debates over font choices and server capacity, fueled by lukewarm coffee and a stubborn passion to get it right. But we always found our way back to each other, our respect for one another's talent overriding any disagreement. The company grew. We moved from the garage to a small rented office, then to the sleek, glass-walled space we were in now. We were successful. We were in love. We were about to have a baby. Life felt complete, symmetrical. The house we lived in was another project we tackled together. A rundown mid-century modern we'd bought for a steal and spent 2 years renovating. Every weekend was a flurry of sanding, painting, and YouTube tutorials. Mark taught me how to tile a bathroom. I taught him that eggshell and satin were not, in fact, the same finish. We chose every fixture, every color, every piece of furniture together. The house was a testament to our partnership, its open-plan living space a reflection of the way we lived our lives. Intertwined, collaborative, with no walls between us. Or so I thought. The nursery was the final room to be completed. It had the best light, overlooking the garden where I had planted a small lemon tree the day we found out I was pregnant. I had this image in my head of our son, years from now, picking lemons from that tree to make lemonade. A simple, perfect picture of the future. We had a name picked out.
Lang.
It meant lion strong and brave. I would talk to him every day, my hands cupped around my growing belly. I'd tell him about the company, about the house, about his father who worked too hard but had the kindest heart. I'd play him music, classical in the mornings, soft jazz at night. I felt him move for the first time on a Tuesday afternoon while I was in a budget meeting. A tiny, fluttery kick. I gasped, my hand flying to the spot. The finance director had paused, confused, but I just smiled, a secret, joyful smile. I texted Mark immediately. He sang hello. His reply came back instantly. Tell him his dad says hi back, and to stop kicking the CEO. It was our perfect little world. A bubble of light and hope, so fragile, I didn't even realize it could be popped. The end of that world didn't come with a bang. It came with a cramp, a small, sharp pain that I dismissed as one of the normal aches of pregnancy. But then there was another, and another. A cold dread, slick and oily, began to seep into the edges of my happiness. I called Mark. His voice was distracted, full of the stress of a looming product launch. I'm in the middle of something, honey. Can it wait? I tried to keep my voice even, tried to pretend the fear wasn't clawing at my throat. I don't think so, I whispered. Something's wrong. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy.
Then a sigh.
The sound of his irritation was a physical blow. I'll be home as soon as I can. He didn't make it in time. He wasn't there when the pain became a monstrous, tearing thing. He wasn't there when the world dissolved into a blur of paramedics and sterile hospital lights. He wasn't there to hold my hand when the doctor, a kind woman with sad eyes, spoke the words that shattered my universe. I'm so sorry. There's no heartbeat. I remember the silence that followed. A profound, crushing silence that was louder than any scream. It was the sound of a future being erased. The sound of a name that would never be spoken aloud again. The sound of a love that was supposed to be unconditional, failing its first, most important test. When Mark finally arrived, his suit jacket slung over his shoulder, his face a mask of weary frustration, I was already a ghost. He looked at my empty eyes, at the pale, hollowed-out shell of the woman he loved, and I saw something in his expression shift. It wasn't just grief. It was inconvenience. The launch was in 2 days. This was, to put it mildly, terrible timing. And in that moment, in the cold, white room that smelled of antiseptic and loss, I felt a second, deeper kind of heartbreak. I had not just lost my son. I was losing my husband, too. I just didn't know it yet. The silence followed us home. It settled into the corners of our beautiful, hand-renovated house like a thick, choking dust. It sat between us at the dinner table, a third person, monstrous and invisible. It lay in the bed between our turned backs at night. The duckling yellow nursery became a forbidden room, the door kept firmly shut. But I could still feel it, a silent, screaming void at the end of the hallway. Grief was a physical presence, a heavy cloak I couldn't take off. It made my limbs feel like lead, and my thoughts slow and syrupy. Some days, just getting out of bed was a Herculean effort. I wanted to talk about Leo. I needed to. I needed to say his name, to acknowledge the space he had carved out in our lives, in my body. I needed to mourn him with the only other person on earth who should have felt his loss as keenly as I did. But Mark refused. Every time I tried to bring him up, Mark would shut down. His jaw would tighten, his eyes would glaze over. "We need to move on, Clara," he'd say, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "Dwelling on it isn't healthy, move on." As if our son was a misflight or a bad investment. As if the 9 months of hopes and dreams could be deleted like a corrupted file. He threw himself into work with a manic intensity. He left before I woke up and came home long after I'd cried myself to sleep. The office, our shared creation, became his sanctuary, his escape from the grieving woman who haunted the halls of his home. When he was home, he was a stranger. He'd sit in front of the television, the blue light flickering across his blank face, a beer sweating in his hand. He stopped touching me. First, it was the gentle, absent-minded touches that had stitched our days together. A hand on my back as I passed, his fingers in my hair. Then it was the hugs, the kisses. Soon, even accidental contact was avoided. We were 2 planets in a decaying orbit, spinning farther and farther apart. I tried. God, I tried. I suggested grief counseling.
He scoffed.
I don't need to pay someone to listen to me complain. I tried to cook his favorite meals, hoping to coax some semblance of our old life back. He'd pick at the food, his eyes on his phone, answering work emails. I felt like I was drowning, and he was standing on the shore, watching, annoyed that my struggle was ruining his view. The worst part was the blame. It was never spoken aloud, not at first. It was in his silences, in the way he wouldn't look at my body, the body he saw as having failed. It was in his clipped, impatient tones when I would break down in a fresh wave of sorrow. The unspoken accusation hung in the air, that I was too weak, too fragile, too much. That my grief was an indulgence he didn't have time for. The company Innovate became another source of pain. It had once been our shared passion, a symbol of our partnership. Now it was the wedge driving us apart. He started making major decisions without consulting me. He hired a new project manager, a woman named Clara, without even telling me he was interviewing. "She's a rock star," he'd said dismissively when I questioned him. "We needed her." "You haven't been focused," the criticism stung, sharp and unfair. I hadn't been focused because our son had died. Because my heart was shattered into a million pieces. Because the man I loved was treating me like a stranger. I tried to re-engage, to force myself back into the rhythm of work. I went into the office, sat in my chair, and stared at my screen, the design mock-ups looking like a language I no longer understood. The vibrant colors and clean lines felt like a mockery of the chaos inside me. My colleagues were kind, but awkward. They'd offer condolences with averted eyes, unsure of what to say. They'd tiptoe around me, treating me like I was made of glass. I could feel their pity, and I hated it. I hated feeling like a ghost in my own company, a tragic figurehead nobody knew how to deal with. The late nights at the office became more frequent for Mark. "We're pushing for the Q4 launch," he'd say, the excuse ready on his lips. I started to notice things. Small, discordant notes in the melody of our life. A credit card bill with a charge for a restaurant I'd never been to, a romantic, 2-person table kind of place. He claimed it was a client dinner. A scent on his collar that wasn't his cologne or my perfume. It was light, floral. Something cloyingly sweet. He said he'd been hugged by a colleague congratulating him on a new contract. I wanted to believe him. Desperately. I told myself I was being paranoid, that my grief was making me see shadows where there were none. The alternative was too monstrous to contemplate. Who could be so cruel? Who could abandon their wife in the darkest moment of her life for someone else? It was unthinkable. And so, I pushed the doubts down, burying them under the heavy weight of my sorrow. The financial strain began to show in subtle ways. Mark, who had always been a stickler for our shared budget, became evasive about money. When I asked to see the company's quarterly profit and loss statements, a routine practice for us, he stalled. "I've got it handled, Clara.
Don't worry about it.
Just focus on getting better, getting better." As if grief were a flu I needed to recover from. He started talking about the future of the company in a way that felt alien to me. He mentioned bringing in new investors, possibly selling a majority stake. It would take the pressure off, he argued. We could have a clean break, start fresh. A clean break from what? From our dream? From the years of work we'd put in? His words chilled me. It felt less like a business strategy and more like he was trying to dismantle our life, piece by piece. The breaking point, the moment the sickening suspicion became an undeniable certainty, came on a rainy Tuesday night. It was the 6-month anniversary of the day we lost Leo. I had spent the day in a fog of quiet remembrance, looking at the one ultrasound picture we had, tracing the tiny, perfect curve of his spine. I had hoped Mark would come home early, that maybe, just for one night, we could grieve together. He didn't. 9 p.m. became 10, then 11. I called his phone. It went straight to voicemail. I called his assistant, who sounded flustered, and said he left the office hours ago for a dinner meeting at midnight. A notification popped up on our shared tablet. It was from our home security system. A motion alert from the camera at a small rental property we owned on the other side of town, a place we were planning to renovate and flip. We never went there. Why would there be motion? My heart started to pound, a frantic, trapped bird in my chest. With trembling fingers, I opened the live feed. And there it was. Mark's car, parked in the driveway. The lights were on inside the little bungalow. Through the window, I could see two silhouettes. A man and a woman. They were dancing. Slowly, intimately. The woman tilted her head back to laugh, and even in the grainy, night vision footage, I recognized her.
Clara.
The rock star project manager. The one we needed, the floral, cloyingly sweet perfume. The client dinners. The late nights. It all clicked into place, a series of tumblers falling in a lock I never knew existed. I watched them for a long time, my body frozen, the tablet clutched in my numb hands. I watched my husband, the man who couldn't stand to be in the same room as his grieving wife, sway gently in the arms of another woman in a house we owned. The sound that escaped my lips was not a cry. It was a thin, ragged gasp, the sound of the last thread of hope snapping. The bubble didn't just pop. It exploded, leaving me in a cold, dark vacuum where nothing good had ever existed at all. The drive home from the rental property is a blur. I don't remember the traffic lights or the turns. All I remember is the feeling of the steering wheel, cold and solid beneath my white-knuckled grip, the only real thing in a world that had dissolved into smoke and mirrors. When Mark finally walked through the door at 2 a.m., he was humming. Humming. He stopped when he saw me sitting in the dark, the tablet on the coffee table in front of me, the video feed still playing on a loop. His cheerful facade crumbled. The blood drained from his face. He didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He just looked annoyed.
Caught.
"Clara," he started, his voice a low warning. Don't what, Mark?" I asked, my own voice eerily calm. "Don't see what's right in front of my face? Don't acknowledge that while I was at home, mourning our son, you were dancing with your employee in our house?" He had the audacity to flinch at the mention of Leo. "This has nothing to do with him," he hissed. "This has everything to do with him. The dam broke. The grief, the anger, the betrayal, all of it came pouring out in a torrent of hot, ragged words. You left me. You left me alone in the rubble of our life, because you were too much of a coward to face it. You couldn't stand the sight of me, of my sadness, because it reminded you of what we lost. So you found someone new, someone shiny and unbroken, to distract you. He didn't deny it. He just stood there, his jaw tight, his arms crossed over his chest in a defensive posture. She understands me, he said, the words a slap in the face. She's not drowning in misery all the time. Life with her is easy. That one word told me everything. He didn't want a partner. He wanted an escape. He didn't want to heal. He wanted to forget. He was willing to burn our entire life to the ground just so he could warm his hands by the fire. I want a divorce, he said, the words dropping like stones into the suffocating silence of the room. I'll be fair. We'll sell the company, split the assets. You'll be taken care of, like a pet, like a problem to be managed and dismissed. He was already talking about our shared dream, our life's work as a line item on a spreadsheet, something to be liquidated. I looked at the man standing in the home we built together, the man who had once wiped paint from my nose in a room full of hope, and I saw a complete stranger. A hollowed-out man I didn't know at all. The love I had for him, which had been dying a slow, painful death for months, finally flatlined. In its place, something else began to grow. Something cold and hard and sharp. It felt like a shard of ice forming in my chest. The days that followed were a waking nightmare. Mark moved out immediately, taking only a suitcase, as if he couldn't get away from the house, from me, fast enough. The silence he left behind was different. It was no longer the heavy, oppressive silence of shared grief. It was the clean, empty silence of absence. And it was, in a strange way, a relief. I was alone, but I was no longer being actively abandoned. The next week, I was served with divorce papers. A courier delivered them, a cheerful young man who had no idea he was handing me the official death certificate of my life as I knew it. The papers were as cold and clinical as Mark had become. He was petitioning for a dissolution of marriage, citing irreconcilable differences. And he was proposing a settlement. He wanted to buy me out of the company. The number he offered was an insult. It was a fraction of what my half was worth, and I knew it. He was counting on me being too broken to fight. He was counting on my grief to be a blanket he could smother me with, while he walked away with everything. I fell apart. For a full week, I let the grief and despair consume me. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I wandered the silent rooms of our house, touching the things we had chosen together, each object a fresh stab of pain. I sat on the floor of the nursery, the door finally open, and I wept. I wept for my son. I wept for my marriage. I wept for the woman I used to be, the one who believed in forever and happy endings. I hit rock bottom. The floor was cold and hard, and there was nowhere else to go. And then something shifted. I was sitting on the floor, staring at the small lemon tree outside the nursery window. It had been neglected for months, but it was still alive. It even had a few stubborn green lemons clinging to its branches. It was surviving, in spite of everything. A tiny, quiet rage began to smolder in the pit of my stomach. It was a weak flame at first, but it was there.
He would not do this to me.
He would not erase me. He would not take my grief and use it as a weapon against me to steal the last thing I had left, the company we built. I had lost my child. I had lost my husband. I would not lose myself. That afternoon, I made a phone call. I found the name of the most ruthless, sharp-tongued family law attorney in the city. A woman named Jessica Thorne, who had a reputation for eviscerating arrogant husbands in the courtroom. When I met her, she was exactly as advertised. She was all sharp angles and sharper intellect, dressed in a severe black suit. She listened to my story without a single flicker of pity in her eyes. Instead, I saw a flicker of something else, professional, predatory interest. When I finished, she leaned back in her leather chair and steepled her fingers. "He thinks you're a puddle of grief he can just mop up and throw away," she said, her voice a low, calculated hum. "Men like that, they always make the same mistake. They get arrogant. They get sloppy. And they underestimate the woman they've wronged. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. So, the question is, Clara, are you going to let him be right? Or are we going to burn his entire world to the ground and toast marshmallows over the embers? For the first time in 6 months, I smiled. A real smile. It felt foreign on my face, like stretching a muscle I hadn't used in a long time. Where do we start? I asked. Jessica's smile in return was thin and dangerous. We start with the money, she said. It's always about the money. The next few weeks were a blur of focused, methodical work. Jessica hired a forensic accountant, a quiet, unassuming man named Arthur, who had the eyes of a hawk and the soul of a bloodhound. Together, we began to dig. We started with the company's books. Mark had changed all the passwords, locking me out of the financial software I had helped design. But he made a mistake. He forgot about the automated cloud backups that were sent to a secure server I had set up years ago as a fail-safe. A server he didn't know existed. It was my back door into our entire financial history. Arthur and I spent days, then weeks, sifting through years of data. We worked out of Jessica's office, the walls covered in white bards, creating a labyrinth of spreadsheets, bank statements, and credit card bills. At first, everything looked clean. Too clean. Mark was smart. He had covered his tracks well. But Arthur was smarter. Embezzlers are like cockroaches, he'd mutter, peering at the screen through his thick glasses. They always leave droppings somewhere. He was right. The first crack appeared in the expense reports. Mark had been submitting inflated invoices from a shell company, a marketing firm that didn't actually exist. The payments were small at first, a few $1,000s here and there disguised as legitimate business expenses. But over the last 6 months, since the time I had been lost in my grief, the amounts had grown exponentially. Tens of thousands of dollars, funneled out of Innovate's operating budget and into a bank account that we traced back to a P.O. box. And from that account, the money trail led directly to him and to her.
We found everything.
The down payment on a new condo in a trendy downtown building, purchased in Clara's name. A brand new luxury car, also in her name. Extravagant vacations to Europe and the Caribbean, paid for with a corporate credit card he'd reported as lost designer clothes, expensive jewelry, 5-star hotel stays. He hadn't just been having an affair. He had been funding a whole new life for himself and his mistress with the money from our company. My company. With every discovery, the shard of ice in my chest grew colder and sharper. The anger was no longer a hot, messy emotion. It was becoming a tool. Precise. Focused. I worked relentlessly, fueled by coffee and a cold, burning sense of purpose. I stopped crying. I started sleeping through the night. The grief for Leo was still there, a constant, aching presence, but it was no longer a weight that pinned me down. It was a stone in my pocket, a heavy reminder of what had been taken from me, a reminder of why I was fighting. I was fighting for the future that Mark had tried to steal, a future that Leo should have been a part of. Jessica was a master strategist. She guided me through the process, her calm, calculating presence a steadying force. "This is our leverage," she said, pointing to the mountain of evidence we had compiled. "He's not just a cheating husband anymore. He's a criminal. He committed fraud against his business partner. That's you." The final piece of the puzzle was the buyout offer. Arthur's analysis confirmed what I had suspected. Mark had been systematically devaluing the company on paper. He had delayed major client payments, pushed lucrative contracts into the next fiscal year, and inflated expenses, all to make Innovate look less profitable than it was. His insultingly low offer wasn't just an attempt to get a good deal. It was part of a calculated scheme to defraud me of my rightful share. He was going to use the money he had already stolen from me to buy me out for pennies on the dollar, leaving him in sole control of a company that was, in reality, thriving. The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of it was what sealed my resolve. This wasn't just about a divorce anymore. This was about justice. Jessica drew up the legal documents. It wasn't just a response to his divorce petition. It was a multi-pronged assault. A civil suit for fraud and embezzlement. a motion to have him removed as CEO pending a financial audit, and the subpoena, the beautiful, terrifying subpoena, addressed directly to Clara. It would compel her to give a deposition under oath. It would force her to produce all her personal bank records, her credit card statements, her property deeds. It would expose her as the beneficiary of stolen funds. She has two choices, Jessica explained, a glint in her eye. She can lie under oath and commit perjury, which is a felony. Or she can tell the truth, which means testifying against the man who has been funding her lifestyle. Either way, Mark loses. The day I walked into the office with that envelope in my hand, I was terrified. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. But as I walked through the doors of the company I had built, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. I was no longer the victim in this story. I was taking back control. I was rewriting the ending. I saw the way my old colleagues looked at me, the mix of pity and fear in their eyes. They had all watched my life implode. They had watched Mark bring his new woman into our space, installing her in a position of power. They had been silent. But I didn't need them. I had the truth. And the truth, I was beginning to realize, was a far more powerful weapon than sympathy. The silence in the office is a living thing. It presses in on us, thick and heavy. Clara is still staring at the subpoena, her face a mask of chalky white. The paper trembles in her hand. Mark takes a step towards her, his voice low and furious. "What is this, Clara? What game are you playing?" I finally turned to look at him. I let my eyes travel over his face, the face I once loved more than anything. I see the panic starting to dawn in his eyes as the implications of the document in Clara's hand begin to sink in. He thought this would be simple. A quiet divorce, a quick settlement. He thought he was dealing with a broken woman. "It's not a game, Mark," I say, my voice level. "It's a consequence." Clara looks up from the paper, her blue eyes wide with a dawning horror. She's not just a mistress caught in a messy divorce anymore. She's a named party in a fraud investigation. The expensive clothes she's wearing, the car she drove to work, the condo she sleeps in, all of it is now evidence. Poisoned fruit from a stolen tree. I don't understand," she stammers, looking at Mark. "What does this mean?" "Embezzlement." Mark's face twists into a snarl.
She's bluffing.
"She's got nothing, do I, Mark?" I ask softly. "Do you want to talk about the shell company, Digital Horizons Marketing? Or the wire transfers to the offshore account? We can talk about the condo. I have the bank statements showing the down payment came directly from the Innovate operating account. 2 days after you told me we had to freeze hiring because of cash flow issues, every word is a hammer blow." I watch the color drain from his face. He knows. He knows I have him. The arrogance that has been his armor for months cracks and falls away, revealing the weak, terrified man underneath. He had built a fortress of lies, and I had just walked through the front door with a wrecking ball. Clara pushes her chair back, the legs scraping against the polished floor. She stands up, holding the subpoena like it's a venomous snake. "Is this true?" she whispers, her eyes locked on Mark. "The money, where did it come from?" He can't even look at her. His gaze is fixed on me, a mixture of hatred and disbelief. He had miscalculated. He had assumed Clara was his partner in crime, but he had never told her what the crime was. He had sold her a fantasy, and I had just handed her the bill. She was a pawn in his game, and she was only now realizing it. "You told me you got a huge bonus," she says, her voice rising with hysteria. "You told me the company was doing better than ever. Security." Mark finally bellows, his voice cracking. "Get her out of here." 2 security guards, men I had hired, appear at the door. They look uncertain, their eyes shifting between Mark, the current CEO, and me, the co-founder and, as far as they know, still his wife. They hesitate. "It's all right, gentlemen," I say calmly. "I'm leaving." I turn my back on them both. On Mark's apoplectic rage and Clara's unraveling panic. I walk towards the door, my steps even and measured. I don't look back. I don't need to. I can feel the implosion happening behind me. I can feel the shockwaves. I had not just served a subpoena. I had lit a match and tossed it into a puddle of gasoline. And now all I had to do was step back and watch it burn. The legal battle was as brutal and ugly as Jessica had promised.
But it was also swift.
Clara, facing the very real possibility of criminal charges as an accessory to fraud, folded completely. Her lawyer cut a deal with Jessica. She would provide a full, sworn affidavit detailing everything Mark had told her and given her in exchange for immunity from civil prosecution. Her testimony was devastating. It corroborated every piece of evidence Arthur had uncovered. It painted a picture of Mark as a manipulative, compulsive liar who had exploited my grief to systematically loot our company. In the face of such overwhelming evidence, Mark had no choice but to surrender. The divorce settlement wasn't a negotiation. It was a capitulation. I got the house. I got a majority stake, 60%, of Innovate. He was forced to resign as CEO, effective immediately. He was left with a mountain of legal debt and a reputation that was utterly destroyed. He was a pariah in the tech community we had once been celebrated in. No one wanted to work with a man who would defraud his own wife while she was mourning the death of their child. I walked back into my company not as a ghost, but as its owner. The first few months were hard. I had to rebuild trust with my employees, many of whom had been caught in the crossfire of Mark and Clara's toxic reign. Clara was, of course, the first to be let go. I didn't do it myself. I had HR handle it with a standard severance package. I never wanted to see her again. My victory was not about her.
It was about me.
It was about reclaiming what was mine. I rebranded the company. I changed the name from Innovate, a name that now felt tainted by his lies, to Leo's Logic. It was a quiet tribute, a way to honor the son I never got a hold. A promise that his short life would be the foundation for something strong and lasting. The work was healing. Pouring my energy into building, creating, and leading was the antidote to the destruction I had endured. The office, once a place of pain and betrayal, slowly transformed back into a place of passion and purpose. The duckling yellow nursery at home was the last ghost to be exorcised. For months, I kept the door closed. I wasn't ready. Then one Saturday morning, I opened it. I took a deep breath and walked inside. I carefully packed away the tiny clothes and the unassembled crib. I didn't throw them away. I donated them to a local women's shelter. I painted the walls a calm, peaceful white. And I turned the room into my home office. A room with the best light in the house, overlooking the lemon tree, which was now thriving. It was a space for my future, not a shrine to my past. I don't know what happened to Mark. I heard through the grapevine that he moved to another state, trying to start over. I don't know if Clara went with him. I find, to my surprise, that I don't care. My anger has cooled, leaving behind not forgiveness, but a profound and lasting indifference. He is no longer a character in my story. He is just a footnote in a chapter one have finished reading. The pain of losing Leo will never go away. It's a part of my cellular makeup now, a quiet ache that surfaces at unexpected moments when I see a child's laughter or hear a certain song. But it no longer defines me. It is a part of my story, but it is not the whole story. I am a woman who survived. A woman who fought back. A woman who built a new life from the ashes of the old one. I am the CEO of my own company. I am the master of my own house. I am a testament to the fact that even after the most devastating fire, new things can grow. Stronger, brighter, and more resilient than before. Thanks for being here with me through this. Subscribing is the best way to help bring more of these stories to life. I'd love to know what this story brought up for you. If you feel comfortable sharing, your stories matter.